Hey, fantastic folks, hope you are doing well. As you know, India celebrated the Kargil War as Vijay Divas a few days back. Though the Indian Army played the major role, Indian Air Force was also involved significantly in this war. So, today I will ask Group Captain Pulak Bhuya a few questions to elaborate on the Air Force operations which helped in winning the war. It'll be a short session as most of you would know much of the details by now. My first question to you is, can you tell me how the Indian Air Force got involved in the war and what were the difficulties in flying missions in those mighty heights?
Thank you, Ankur, for asking me this question and including me in this conversation. Like you said, it will be just a short duration talk. Yeah, I mean, we all know the details how the Kargil War started. Okay. And initially, of course, it was discovered that there was intruders and those have to be pushed back. Initially, the army had taken those actions, but soon they realized that the Pakis were in numbers and they would require help area from the air, and that is the time when the Indian Air Force was called in. The government had given the go ahead for the Indian Air Force to be used in the operations, but with a caveat that you do not cross the international border. Now, this you would know in warfare is like fighting, with your one hand tied behind your back. However, the Indian Air Force actually rose to the occasion and initially started with the operations, the offensive operations with armed helicopters. As you know, the Mi 25s, which were our combat helicopters, could not fly on those heights. So the Mi 17s with ammunitions on board, including machine guns and all, were pushed into service. But at those heights, it was very difficult to pinpoint, specific targets, and hence the helicopters were later withdrawn after some casualties that we suffered. And then the MiG 21s were pushed in with MiG 27s and all. But then again, they met with some limited success, and then we had some setbacks, which you know about Colonel Ahuja and Flight Lieutenant Nachikata at that time, who retired later as a group captain. Nachikata, that is, I'm talking about. So then the other aircrafts of the Indian Air Force were inducted into the operations. And it was a challenge because, as you know, the ballistics of the weapons and the targeting at those heights is very, very difficult. See, I mean, just for an example, if you drop a 25 kg, let's say, just for an example, or let's say 500 kilogram bomb, okay, in the planes, even if it is missing the target by about 20 feet, left, right, up, down, the damage will be substantial. But at heights, in those peaks where they had their, sangars or you can call makeshift bunkers, if it was a deviation of 5 or 6 feet and all, it will fall on the other side of the hill. So the damage will be nil. So the targeting had to be changed, precise targeting had to be done. So the targeting tools were required, which are not available in those earlier aircrafts, like I said, MiG-21s and MiG-27s and all. So the Mirages came in, Jaguars came in, and of course the MiG-29s were used for CAP missions. CAP, if I can just explain in simple terms, is that combat air patrol is basically aircrafts flying at height when your other teammates are doing the strafing or doing the ground attack, they are at heights orbiting over that area so that the enemy aircraft do not come and interfere with your operations. Okay. So later I will go on to what kind of operations the Indian Air Force carried out. But this is suffice to say that these are the things, challenges that we faced, and that's how we got involved into the Kargil operations.
All right, understood. So another question for you is: did the Air Force have experience of prosecuting the war at those heights? Because as we know, it's a high altitude battlefield.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, see, there are hardly any air forces in the world which had to prosecute wars at those heights. Okay. And the requirements on the aircraft, on the ammunitions, on the pilot itself, targeting, like I said before, is different than when you are fighting on the plains. Okay. Yes, Indian Air Force has the experience of operating at those heights and continuously, actually, on air maintenance sorties, where we are helping out the Indian Army in our borders with China and Pakistan on this sector, Ladakh sector, with supply missions, with casualty evacuations by helicopters, etc. Okay. But the fighters also have operated in this area, but we haven't had any operations, real operations in those heights, because as you know, whether it was 1962, where the Air Force was never used in the offensive operations, or in 1965 or in 1971, the Indian Air Force did not have to operate at those heights. Of course, neither did the Army operate at those heights.
Twin. So, Group Captain, the other question which I had was: what was your assessment and assignment of how the Indian Air Force performed and how the assets were effectively used?
Okay, I mean, before I go on to these questions of the, what was the assessment, okay, and which are the assets that were used. Of course, the operations that the Indian Air Force carried out can be termed in two broad buckets. One was that we have to keep our own airspace safe so that the Pakistani Air Force did not intrude into our territory and did not, anyway interfere with the operations from our side that was going on in that sector. And for that, the entire western and northern command areas, that is starting from Ladakh down to Rajasthan and even Gujarat, had to be guarded, because you can never know, because when the war goes badly for one side, that side tends to open up some other sector. But this Kargil operations, because of the world, had an eye on it, United States was asking both sides to stop the fighting, and especially Pakistan, because they were actually the aggressors. So that possibility was limited. However, we had to be on our guard. So all our air defense assets, that includes the fighters, the radars, the surface-to-air missiles, your anti-aircraft guns, and all other assets which are required for the air defense of that sector were used. The other operations were the offensive operations, where you had the fighters employed in interdiction missions. In layman's term, it is strike missions. That means you are attacking enemy positions. And enemy positions is not only positions where they had artillery guns, or where they had bunkers, or where there was concentration of their troops. But apart from that, the entire logistic lines, because as you know, in warfare, No army can fight if there is no logistic support. And logistic support is of various kinds. It includes weapon supply, it includes your food, rations, medical facilities, and all such things. Okay. So they were obviously the Pakistanis had stockpiled some of these already at those heights and at positions which are slightly lower, but from where they can, quickly move those supplies to the top. So in the strike operations, we had to destroy not only the positions that they were holding, or not only to soften them up, along with the artillery. Artillery was also used, and the Indian artillery actually performed brilliantly. The much maligned Bofors gun was the hero, actually. I would say that. So the Indian Air Force aided in that. Along with the artillery, we were there to soften the target. What do you mean by soften? Soften is that you bombard them so much that the enemy is there with their heads down. Their morale is low. And that helps the troops to, our own troops, to go up and capture those areas and kill them or throw them back to their own territory. And remember, this was a situation where the enemy was sitting on top and the Indian army had to actually climb steep hills and mountains to reach the top. So it was a very difficult situation, and that's why we lost so many of our brave soldiers, officers and all. Okay. But anyhow, coming back to the point, if you remember, I had told you earlier that there was a caveat saying that we should not cross the international border. But at those heights, sometimes you never know which is the international border. Okay, but on the ground you can see, but from there it is very difficult to see which is the international border. But however, we had pinpointed their supply line. That is from where in their Skardu sector, Gilgit sector, from where they were bringing in those supplies, and we had to attack them, and we attacked them. We also attacked here I will tell you an interesting situation. Okay, I am digressing slightly, but the Mirages and the Jaguars to some extent had ammunitions which are known as precision guided weapons, munitions. Okay, those could be bombs, those could be rockets, whatever kind. Okay, but they were guided. Okay, they were not free fall weapons. So we had to bring in equipment quickly because we did not have that much of stockpile of those things, and our engineers worked brilliantly. The Air Force engineers and technical officers I'm talking about, and the men, and we practiced it slightly, and thereafter we used it in the battlefield, and it, the success was enormous. Okay. Then, of course, we had those, like I said, interdiction missions. We had our strike missions to attack the supply lines. We attacked the bunkers. We attacked the troop concentration and all that. And one interesting thing is, a couple of times actually the Mirages sitting there were also, flying up there, were also guiding the artillery guns from below. Now we are firing from there, firing up from below to up. Okay, that was an interesting innovation. So this kind of innovations were carried out and we achieved great success. If you talk about the number of sorties and missions, I would not go on to some of those details or something, but suffice to say that we had more than about 2,500, sorties counted. And this doesn't count the helicopters sorties which were used for casualty evacuations, or other transport aircraft which were used for bringing in supplies to Leh airfield or other close by airfields. Okay, So this is in nutshell what we had used there.
All right. Thank you so much. So, my final question to you is, what was your personal experience of the war?
Okay, I mean, personally, I was actually that time posted in some other place in Shillong actually. So I was called when the balloon went up. That means when the war started and Air Force was involved. I had already commanding at that time. I was on a so I went there, and initially, yeah, I did one or two. Okay, but I was involved in the air defense side, and I was also involved in some of the planning for those missions and all. Okay, but I can say for the pilots and technicians and others which were flying these operations from various airfield in the Kashmir Valley, it was hectic. They were flying day and night. Okay, and please remember that not only the strike missions, when the strike missions were flying, like I said before, earlier I had said about the cap sorties, the missions which are, you can call it now, air superiority missions. That means the fighters which are up there in the sky looking around so that the strike can go through without any hindrance from their side. One thing I forgot to tell you is that in those operations, there was always this threat of the shoulder-fired missiles. Pakis had a lot of Stinger missiles. Okay, so we had to stay away from the bubble of this Stinger missiles. So remember, even if those heights were 18,000, 20,000 all, and Stinger missiles had their envelope, kill envelope, we had to be above that and still be able to carry out the strikes successfully. Now, coming back to the my own experience, I enjoyed that. I wish I was much younger. I was in active flying that time because I have already commanded a squadron. I was already a wing commander. Yes, I could have been involved in the int gathering because a lot of recce missions. We had some inputs from other intelligence units and all regarding the targets and all that, but Air Force had carried out their own recce missions to find out the exact locations of that. So yes, I was mostly involved with the air defense. Okay, but because we work as a team, and team not only within the Air Force, but work as a team in the entire armed forces, because there are some of the naval assets, had also come in. Okay, and if required, they could have been also used. Naval assets appropriate for those areas. And like I said before, you also, mentioned the Indian Army played the pivotal role, and the Air Force was equally with them as a team. And at the end, like we said, we were successful. The Pakistanis were pushed back. They lost much more than us. But the sad thing was that we lost many of our young officers, many brave soldiers, and this loss of life was very painful. Okay, we used to feel that pain, and inside you, feel that sense of taking revenge on them. I would say now, after retiring from Indian Air Force and after so many years after this war has, ended, that feeling is there. But even then, in the heat of war, you have to maintain your equilibrium. You have to think rationally, and then, show them your courage, show them your josh, and fight to win. And that was the motto.
Thank you so much, Group Captain Pulak Bhuiya, for your perspective, experience, and also your also the kind of the way you explained Operation Safed Sagar, along with OP Vijay of the Army, and also OP Talwar of the Indian Navy. Thank you so much. Fantastic, folks. This is all for us for now. We would be coming back with more stories about the Indian Armed Forces and specifically, rather, the Indian Air Force. Thank you and see you on the other side.